Hello everyone, Giltar here with a Transformers action figure review. This time we'll be looking at Generations Thrust. Now Generations Thrust is a deluxe class figure, which is kind of the small to medium sized Transformers toy class or size class categorization. They range from Legends class figures, which are really small figures. One example here is Bumblebee here. Which is about this big, and here is a deluxe class figure. Now the next class up from Legends sort of size would be Scout class, which I have here in the form of Scout class Breacher. So it is a little larger. Then we have deluxe class here in Thrust, and then there are also larger classes such as Voyager, Leader class. Depending on what particular Transformers toy line you're looking at, there are different size classes. There's Ultra, and then there's things like Basic. There are many different actually terms for different class sizes, and they're not all exactly the same, but right now we'll concentrate on the current modern size class definitions being used in the current ongoing toy lines for Transformers. So again, deluxe class is the size class for Thrust here. Now Thrust was previously only available in the Classics Transformers toy line through an exclusive box set from Botcon, which is a Transformers convention. Now it came out in 2007 in the box set called Games of Deception. In that set were exclusive figures of Thrust, Dirge, Dreadwind, and Bugbite. Now, Dreadwind was a repaint of Classics Jetfire, and Bugbite was a repaint of Classics Bumblebee. Thrust and Dirge were repaints of Classics Starscream, and I believe they were actually retoolings as well. This is not exactly the same as the Games of Deception Thrust figure. In that figure, it was actually a little more accurate to the G1 design, where it had stubbier wings closer to the body, and I believe the null ray cannons or the missile launcher parts here were actually thicker, stubbier as well. But this is nevertheless a pretty good representation of Thrust. Not exactly 100% accurate to the Generation 1 or G1 character design, but it's close. And the thing is, both the Classics and Generation toy lines are not meant to be totally accurate to the sort of original designs of the characters. What the Generations and Classics lines sort of intend to do is they take existing characters and give them a more contemporary design or look in toy form, and that's exactly what we see here in Generations Thrust. A very nice looking alt or alternate or vehicle form of a sort of a mishmash of, I think it's based off of an F-15 jet fighter, but not entirely accurate. Now, the funny thing is that it has these VTOL turbines on the top here, which look kind of odd, but that's what the character of Thrust had in the show. And then on the bottom we have these sort of really large missile launchers, and they are functional. They're spring-loaded. There we go. Pretty powerful springs in them. I'll just remove them for now. Now, when you get the toy in the packaging, it has these VTOL thrusters unpegged. Or rather pegged into a different position. They actually have them attached to the rear tail fins here, like so. And they have both of them at the bottom, but I prefer to have them on the top here because it's a little more, it's not necessarily accurate, but it's closer to likeness to the G1 or Generation design of Thrust, where the VTOL thrusters or turbines were on top of the wings rather than on the tail fins down at the bottom here. The figure itself looks really nice. It uses fairly accurate colors in that it has this sort of rather than a black, it uses sort of a dark grayish brown color, a really rich, deep burgundy color for the majority of Thrust's colors, and it's a metallic, not paint, but a metallic plastic formula used for it. Not metallic in terms of physical structure, but metallic in appearance. So it has a really nice looking effect. It's a really nice looking figure. Now, I will say that I do own the second version of Classic Starscream, which was more Generation 1 accurate in terms of paint scheme and the decals or decals. But it did look a little plasticky, a little toy-like, whereas Thrust here, it still looks like a toy, but it has just a better presentation in terms of the coloring of the figure. So the burgundy here looks really great, and also there's some chrome inside the cockpit with a transparent yellow plastic over it for a really interesting effect. Chrome isn't really seen these days in mainline Hasbro Transformers toys. It's something that was more commonplace in older Transformers toy lines, and these days you would only see chrome normally in the Takara Tomy versions of the figures. Generally they have different paint schemes and the use of chrome for better or worse, because chrome tends to flake. It's not very durable, and you know what, the thing is, these are toys first and foremost. They're going to experience some play wear. So personally, I don't think chrome's the best choice for toys, though it's something that's perfectly fine in my opinion for more collector-oriented figures. Now, as far as the top and side views of the vehicle or alt form, it looks great. Bottom, it doesn't look too bad. Not too much obvious robot kibble or robot parts showing, though there is a considerable gap here for where the cockpit section will go in robot mode or humanoid mode, and there is Thrust's face here just kind of staring out at us, and it has some visible face or visible head syndrome, which is a term that you'll probably come across quite frequently in the Transformers fandom. Now, as far as transformation, it's pretty straightforward. I really like the design. It's not overly complicated or even complex, but it's involved enough so that it is a fun process. There are a few different ways you can approach this, but this is how I would transform this figure. So first, I would just extend the lower legs. And also there are these sort of landing gear wheels here that aren't articulated. You can just flip them in to the chest so that they are recessed or inside the chest there. Then you would flip up the wings, separate the legs, flip down the feet. And then the next part is you're basically just raising the sort of upper section of the jet, and you're separating it from the body, like so. And here's where you're going to do just some rotational sort of transformation. Basically, you're going to separate the cockpit from the main body section there, rotate the cockpit so that it's facing forward here, and also rotate this top section, which is separate, so that Thrust's face is also facing forward. And next, you just flip down the section here, flip out the arms, and you're basically almost there. So you're just going to close the chest section, the torso, flip in the shoulders just so that they're a little more flush. The fists here are just basically hinged, so you can flip them out. And here you basically have Thrust in robot form. Now, again, because as it's packaged, the VTOL turbines are on the tail fins, and that's where in all the promotional photography, that's where you'll see them placed. But to have a more G1 sort of accurate placement, I prefer to put them on the wings here so that they're facing forward. And if you have them on the tail sections, they're sort of pointing upwards with the Decepticon symbols upside down. I like it this way so that you can actually see the Decepticon symbol right side up there. And finally, you can then attach the null ray cannons or these missile launchers to the shoulders where there's a circular hole there. And it seems to be a common problem with the mold, but the peg for the right arm is loose. It doesn't sit in very securely, whereas the peg for the left arm is more, I guess, tight to the hole or port. Let me just move this off camera for a second so I can attach it. But again, it's a working spring-loaded missile launcher. It's a interesting gimmick. It's got quite some force behind it, so yeah. I'm not a big fan of missile launcher gimmicks or whatever, but it's not too bad. I do like the sort of really not necessarily G1 accurate appearance of the classics mold of Thrust here, but it evokes the G1 aesthetics. It's a very chunky, sort of 1980s semi-super robot design. It's not real robot by any means, but it's sort of a hybrid. I've always viewed Transformers designs as a bit of super robot and a bit of real robot. And I like that sort of mix of features. Now, as far as articulation goes, it's not the greatest in the world, but it's actually pretty decent. Starting with the feet, there's really no articulation there, though you can sort of adjust the front portion of the foot if you want. It's on a hinge. There's a rotational joint at the knee. You can bend the knee to 90 degrees. The hips are on ball joints. Now, the wings do get in the way of articulation, but the good thing about the wings is that you can move them out of the way to vary your poses for both the arms and the legs. Now, for the body itself, the torso, there's really no articulation. That's due to transformation purposes. You know, if this had a joint there, then it would be a far less stable figure, and it wouldn't be very practical. However, the arms themselves do have some basic articulation. Not really articulation per se. This is really more from the transformation design, but the wrists are hinged for sideways movement. The elbows do bend to 90 degrees. The shoulders are hinged for full rotation, and they can bend outwards, though the missile launchers do get in the way. So if you remove it, you can have more free movement, but I like having the missile launchers or the null ray cannons attached there. The head itself can rotate as well. Again, the wings can rotate. And that's pretty much for articulation. So, time to head to final thoughts. Overall, I really do like the Thrust figure. As somebody who never got the exclusive Thrust Classics figures or the Gentei figure of Thrust a few years ago, I'm happy to say that this is a really great version of the figure. The mold itself is good. Some people may not like it as much because it seems a little outdated. And granted, that's true. It's a few years old, but I think it's a really decent mold at worst. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's a really great representation of the Seeker design, the Jet Decepticon design. And it's also a deluxe class figure. If you look at something that's a little larger, I'm pretty sure more features could have been added, better articulation, a better sculpt. But as it is, for a $10 to $15 action figure, that's a transformable toy that has both a vehicle and humanoid robot form, I think it's a great product. I mean, it's not expensive, it has a lot of good functionality, and for anybody who's really interested in this figure, you're probably going to be a Transformers fan or a Seekers fan, and if you are one of those type of people, you're going to really like this figure, in my opinion. So definitely worth the purchase. Visually it's great, functionally it's good. A few nitpicks in terms of visible face syndrome in alt form, and a big gap in the torso, and not the greatest articulation, but for a $10 to $15 purchase, I think it's well worth it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review and got something out of it. I'll be doing more reviews of Generations Transformers figures. In fact, I have all 4 of the first wave of Generations figures. So after Thrust here, I'll be reviewing War for Cybertron Optimus Prime. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next video.